Hey everyone, I wanted to welcome you to week 4 of our English 302 class. Hey, can't believe it, we're already in week 4. I wanted to just let you know I'm really enjoying reading your comments. Loved the comments and thoughts on homilias, and really what I think happens with homilias is if we really want to understand the story really becomes rhetoric. Because in the end, I think it really is rhetoric to say that we can't save the child. But given that, I wanted to add today to our understanding of rhetoric and argument. So, great comments on how you guys define rhetoric. Most of class likes to define rhetoric as the ability to persuade. As of week 4, I'm still going to maintain my definition of rhetoric, and it's still going to be words that are used to manipulate, deceive, and con people. I notice that class overwhelmingly likes to use the word persuade, so we'll put that to the test in the next couple of weeks. But what I want to do today is to talk about the next step of understanding how rhetoric and argument works. So we know that rhetoric and argument uses 3 things: logos, pathos, ethos. Logos is logic, pathos is emotion, and ethos is character and authority. So now we're going to talk about how rhetoric separates itself from argument, because there's something that rhetoric always uses that a strong argument will avoid, and that is fallacies. So in this lecture, I want to just talk about fallacies. And so I know sometimes students might hear the term fallacy, they might panic, or sometimes they might think like fallacies are boring or that they're hard to understand. But really, once you understand how fallacies work, they really are kind of ingenious. Some fallacies are easy to identify, some fallacies are funny, and then some fallacies are just straight up stupid. So before we can talk about identifying fallacies, we need to define what the term fallacy means. So in a ground class, I could write the word fallacy on the board and ask students, what do they think the word fallacy means? And notice if you hear the word, and sometimes if you look at the word, most students can guess that fallacy is something that's false or something that's fake. So I define fallacies as false logic. So if you think about it, if we go out in the real world and we catch someone using rhetoric, and we accept my definition of rhetoric as words that are used to manipulate, deceive, and con people, and then we catch that person using a fallacy. So they're saying something that's false, something that's fake, or it's false logic. What happens is we start to critically think, and we're going to be less impacted by that person's rhetoric. So fallacies are important to understand and identify. So if you look in our textbook, I think there are something like 20 different fallacies. So some of the fallacies I like, some of the fallacies are silly, and I think some of the fallacies require a certain level of critical thinking. But one of the easiest fallacies, I think, in our textbook is the bandwagon. So if you think about what is the bandwagon, everyone else is doing it, why aren't you? Everyone else is taking Professor Gutowski's online class, why aren't you? Everyone else is, taking drugs, why aren't you? So the bandwagon is a really easy fallacy to kind of identify. And I have a 12-year-old who's now in junior high, and it's interesting, she really falls for the bandwagon because, she'll say, oh, everyone else is doing it, so I should be doing it, right? So the bandwagon seems simple, but it's used quite often. Now, the other fallacies that I like, one of the fallacies is called an ad hominem. And an ad hominem is when you attack a person's character rather than addressing the issue. So an ad hominem is when you attack a person's character rather than addressing the issue. So imagine that we have a student in our class who says, hey, don't take Professor Gutowski's class, he's just like Hitler. Don't take Professor Gutowski's class, he's just like Saddam Hussein. Don't take Professor Gutowski, he's a son of a bitch. Well, notice what that imaginary student did was they used an ad hominem. Notice he attacked my character rather than addressing an issue, right? He compared me to, the worst dictator ever. He called me a son of a bitch, rather than addressing an issue that says, hey, don't take Gutowski's English online class, he's late to get to responses. Don't get to Gutowski's class, he creates confusing videos. So the ad hominem is when you attack a person's character rather than addressing the issue. The other fallacy is the non sequitur. And the non sequitur is when you associate two things that have nothing in common and try to associate them together. So imagine another imaginary student in our online class says, don't take Professor Gutowski's class, it's just like Auschwitz. Don't take Professor Gutowski's class, it's just like Dachau. Don't take Professor Gutowski's class, it's like being trapped in a concentration camp. And notice, once again, right, that's a non sequitur, someone trying to associate something that has nothing in common with my class, right? Taking my class is nothing like being in a concentration camp. And I think the reason why I like these last two fallacies is notice that we see them all the time in politics. Our former president was very good at using those fallacies. So I think it's important that we recognize and are able to identify different fallacies. So what you're going to do, there's a discussion board in which you're going to kind of look over the fallacies in our textbook, talk about the ones you like the most, the ones you like the least. And then during the week, I'll go in and start looking at your comments on Into the Wild. Into the Wild is going to be a lot of fun. Look forward to see what you have and what you say. And if you need anything from me, feel free to come by during my Zoom office hours or send me an email.